session. Vishu, you want to talk about the session?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all. So in the biologics scaling sessions, we have two panel discussions. First one is being chaired by Mr. Utkarsh Palnitkar, and to just save the time, we will not be introducing the speakers separately, and I will request the Utkarsh sir to introduce the speakers as and when it is going on. And the second panel discussion is being chaired by Mr. G.S. Krishnan. And before that, we had an interesting interview with Dr. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, which will be playing now, about the sector insights about the biopharma industry.
I'd just like to say the panel discussions, the first one will be what would it take to make India a biosimilar hub? And the second one is on challenges and opportunities. So this is what I have to add here. Thank you.
Now I request team to play the interview of ma'am with Kiran. You can
so can we have the video, please? So what I decided when Kiran was supposed to travel, but because of a family, say the death in the family, she could not travel. But at the same time, she wouldn't have come here as well. So I did an interview with Kiran at her Biocon office. Can we have the presentation, please? Yeah.
Yeah, please.
So.
Thank you so much, Kiran, for taking time out and talking to us. Kiran, biologics is one of the areas that we felt was hugely important. We want to pick your brains. Before we do our
Yes, very nice.
your vision of we scale biologics to take India to the next level. If you remember, in 2004, under Biden's overall guidance, we had taken up opportunities in biotechnology in this position, and you need to keep it address then. And now, 18 years, we are again talking of India's position in biologics. So we've been seeing this happen, but not really India is becoming a significant player in the global market. What would be the reasons for that?
Very good question, Deep. Why is it that Biocon has remained fairly on its own when it comes to investing in biologics manufacturing and scaling up when it comes to biologics manufacturing? And, I was then quite struck by a couple of factors. One is that I think India as a country tends to basically have a sectoral focus based on a set of success metrics. And when you look at the success metrics of generic medicines, everyone then wants to basically play in that space because it's a tried and tested sector with very assured returns on certain investments. Then the market starts judging you by ROCE and then it becomes very difficult to justify the big differences between investing in generics versus biologics. And that's where then I think, there is this stepping in and stepping out very quickly. So what I found is that the investment needs of investing in biomanufacturing order of magnitude or many orders of magnitude higher than generic medicines. Starting with drug substance and then of course drug products. As you know, when it comes to drug products, it's all sterile fill and finish facilities, and when it comes to drug substance, it's very high-end sterile manufacturing in terms of mammalian cell culture or any of those biologic manufacturing platforms. So what tends to happen is that when you have to balance or take judgment calls between investing $10 million versus $100 million, the obvious choice is $10 million. Especially when the return on investment is so much more predictable.
Yes.
The gestational timelines are much shorter and the return on investment is much higher. I think that is what has kept companies away from investing in biomanufacturing.
Yes. Are we risk averse?
It's not about risk. I don't think it's about risk. It's more to do with risk, yes, in one sense. If we had actually invested in novel biologics, I think then the ecosystem would have been created. And then you would have had the risk appetite to invest in biologics.
Right.
But today, we are a generics country, let's face it.
Yes.
And with that kind of risk level, then obviously people are risk averse to biosimilars.
Right.
Because biosimilars has a much higher level of risk associated with it.
Correct.
Both in terms of investment risks and the regulatory risks. Why do I say that? Is because to develop one ANDA would probably cost you not more than $5 million. To develop one biosimilar, BLA, will cost you at least $100 million. That's the stark difference.
Yes.
And then the $5 million is almost an assured approval. You may be not first to file, you may not be first to the market, but certainly you will get there very soon.
Yes.
In the case of biosimilars, it's not assured. In fact, many companies who have tried to develop biosimilar BLAs have actually been rudely shocked when they've actually gone through the clinical program, because that's why it costs $100 million. Unlike generics, which only need BE/BA studies, you need phase 3 clinical trials and comparative clinical trials. That's where many companies have failed to cross the finishing line. Now, after spending $100 million, if you still are not assured of regulatory approvals, you can understand how high the risk is.
Absolutely.
That is the main reason why Indian companies have not invested in biologics manufacturing or biosimilars development. And we happen to now be the only company in the country at scale.
At scale, yes.
So you do have quite a few companies who have invested in biosimilars and biomanufacturing, but it's at a very small scale and not at the regulatory scale that is required for global biosimilars. So you ended up developing biosimilars for India at small scale, and that's where we've remained. So it's not like we don't have biomanufacturing, but we have it at very small scale.
Two things before we close the discussion. One is, are there ways of collaborating to build this market? The other is your vision of biologics in India, maybe 3 or 5 years vision.
So I personally believe, the government can play a very key role, not necessarily by throwing money at companies to try and get them to invest more, but by assured access programs, assured, procurement programs, advanced purchase programs. All this happened during the vaccine, the vaccine development programs during the pandemic. Why can't we replicate that for biologics is the question. If the government was prepared to pay billions of dollars to vaccine companies in India to scale up their manufacturing, that Bharat Biotech got advanced purchase agreements, Biological E got it, Serum Institute of course had done it on their own, but they were able to basically get into big purchase contracts with the government. All this helped the vaccine industry to grow up and strengthen and scale up. If you were to use that as a case in point, you should be able to do the same with biologics.
You should be able to draw the inference of success.
Absolutely.
And build it.
So today, if the government was to say, look, we want to see the biomanufacturing scaled up and we are willing to sign advanced purchase agreements for following biosimilars, for instance, with different companies. I'm sure companies will be willing to invest, right? I know, for instance, that in Malaysia, where we've invested quite a large amount in insulins manufacturing, one of the driving, sort of incentives that got us to go to Malaysia was the offtake agreement that we have with the Malaysian government for insulin purchase.
Oh, I see.
So today, almost 80 to 90% of the insulin procurement in Malaysia is from our facility.
Wonderful.
Okay, those are the kind of schemes you need.
Okay.
Then people will be willing to invest. It's just like the vaccine story.
Yes.
When
Yes.
the vaccine companies were told the government will basically assure you of procurement, that's when everyone started investing.
Absolutely.
Or basically use that advance purchase money to start scaling up. Those are some of the things which we need to do as an advance purchase, where that becomes your subsidy or your incentive.
Thank you. Very briefly, your vision.
My vision for biotech is huge. Okay? I believe that India has a very, very big opportunity in terms of what is happening in the biotech world today. Let's start with personalized medicine, cell and gene therapy. Okay? I think we have a big opportunity in cell and gene therapy. These are, almost plug and play kind of opportunities for companies. These are opportunities where hospitals can actually provide very high-end therapies for a lot of unmet needs in cancer and genetic deficiencies. And I think this is an area which again we have neglected because there wasn't enough money invested in these areas. Now at least we have a few of these cell therapy companies coming up. I've invested in one of them called Immunil, but there's Immunact. There are many other companies which are also starting to come up. I think this is an opportunity because it is a very interesting partnership between hospitals, clinicians and scientists and startups.
Yes.
So I think this is a wonderful opportunity. Just think about it. If you were able to create hundreds of CAR-T or gene therapy facilities at various hospitals and clinics, just think of what that business opportunity could be and the medical tourism opportunity that it could deliver. And we have the capabilities. Okay. Then let's think about synthetic biology, huge opportunity. I think agri-biotech is a huge opportunity in many, many ways. I think the circular economy is also driving a lot of technological opportunities in terms of bio-waste.
Right.
And then finally I come to biopharmaceuticals, which is always something I believe in. I think we've done very well in vaccines. We need to replicate that success in biologics. I think biologics has a huge opportunity for India, given the disease burden that we have in both cancer, diabetes and inflammatory disease. And all these sectors are veering towards very important biotechnologies of whether it is recombinant technologies like for GLP-1s or whether it is mammalian cell culture technologies for monoclonal antibodies or whether it is, fusion proteins, bispecifics, antibody conjugates. I always believe antibody conjugates are going to be very important and India should be very strong in that. So these are some of the areas where I think we should be focusing on. I know that ABLE has sort of provided a roadmap of all these opportunities and strategies. We've always been wanting in terms of policy and serious investments and incentives. And without those investment incentives, I'm afraid we will still be having the same discussion in 2030 and maybe 2047. But I'm hopeful that by 2047 at least we should be in a much brighter position in terms of our capabilities in biomanufacturing. That is my fervent hope.
Thank you. And so do I. I think this is no longer a good to have, it's a must have for India. Thank you so much, Kiran, for your time. I'm overwhelmed.
Dr. Alka Sharma, please. So this is a very special event where we felt that what collectively we have achieved in the biospace, the health technology space, while Dr. Alka Sharma, MD BIRAC, gives her remarks, the reason this special 10 minutes we have kept is to celebrate success and innovation. And who better represents that success and innovation from India than Dr. Chandrasekhar Nair of Molbio. I know, can I just have you here, please? Dr. Chandrasekhar Nair, we call him Chandy or we call him Chandrasekhar, Chandra. Thanks for coming. I know him right from, I think the first time I visited you in Pena, that was in 2003. And then this is perseverance. And he is now, he's the second deep tech unicorn from India. Not he, but his company. So this is, so Chandra, please. And we'll first have.
Thank you, Dipanvita. So, good afternoon, everyone. The eminent scientists, researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, mentors, and enablers of biotech ecosystem in the audience. First of all, I would like to thank Dipanvita to give me this opportunity to share the views and on a very interesting theme on today's event, that is sculpting the next, enabling a future-ready India. And this, once you read this, you start thinking that what are the challenges, opportunities, and since morning we are enjoying all the sessions. Though it's now, we are running behind time, I will be keeping this very, very brief. And as you are aware that over the past few years, global biotech industry has grown by more than 5%, and India contributes 3% market share in the global biotech industry, and India is ranked 12th in global biotech and also in 3rd in Asia Pacific, and we are the largest vaccine manufacturer that we have also heard from Kiran interviews just now. And the number of biotech products, industries, and all startups, number of startups, Dr. Mashelkar has mentioned in that slide, which he got from Secretary DBT, so multiplied during last few years. So our bioeconomy has crossed $80 billion in 2021, and the target is to achieve $150 billion bioeconomy by 2025. So here I would like to mention that government is making continuous effort and acting as a facilitator, laying strategy, creating ecosystem to facilitate end-to-end processes, developing critical mass of skilled manpower, and also addressing regulatory issues from time to time. So we all actually now heard Dr. Mashelkar today morning, and he wonderfully articulated innovation-led growth. So here I would like to give you an example then where Dr. Bhan, actually he was a visionary and he was Secretary DBT. Then he thought about medtech innovation. He started in 2007 with the program Biodesign. Most of you are aware of that Biodesign program, which was started with Stanford University initially in 2007. That time BIRAC was not there. And it started with that, and then I was the program officer driving that Biodesign program. And it started with AIMS and IIT Delhi, later on at IIT Chennai, then THSTI in IIC Bangalore. I am happy to share that now it's at 10 places across the country, Jodhpur IIT, Jodhpur, AIMS, and so KGMU, IIT Kanpur, and also in Northeast. So that was the time that our visionary thought about the medtech innovation. It started with that. Later on, BIRAC came, and you all know that is a industry-academia interface. And you all have seen that BIRAC growing, and it's now after a decade, we all are now thinking to just see that how that keep the pace of the innovation-led growth and how the schemes and programs of BIRAC can be revised. And very recently, last week, we were in US and we went actually there was a vaccine action program in Washington with NIH, and after that we went to San Francisco. And there we actually had both the places in DC as well as in San Francisco in Stanford University, and all we had stakeholders consultation. And happy to share that many of people that they all participated, that they all knew about BIRAC, and many of them have their company here. and they are now beneficiary of BIRAC, and they actually, now we are trying to connect with the international incubators, international startups, so that also we are going to do through government approvals and all. It may take some time, but we are on the job and we will do that. So here I also like to share that as per the Global Innovation Index 2022, there is a huge jump in the rank of India from 81 in 2015 to 40 in 2022. So the innovation which was created, the innovation ecosystem which was created in biotech sector over the year, you can see the fruits now, and it took time, but the way we heard Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Kiran, and also data, that session and all that, everything has contributed in a manner that now we can see that the ranking of our country and also the ecosystem that is growing day by day. So India is an emerging hub for biologics and biosimilars, and Dr. Kiran has elaborated the challenge and opportunity very clearly, and Dr. Dipanvita asked very pertinent questions with Dr. Kiran, which is going to be discussed in more in detail in the coming 2 panel discussions now, which we are having. So over the period, the Department of Biotechnology along BIRAC have made sustained efforts for supporting biologics such as biosimilars, biobetters, and cell therapies, capacity building in terms of both human resource development and training, and also strengthening the existing infrastructure and also creating the new infrastructure which is required for promoting innovation in research institutions in small, medium, and large industries. So National Biopharma Mission, most of you are aware of this, under which support is being provided for several monoclonal antibodies and development of biosimilars and indigenous raw materials such as media, reagents, and bioreactors, and to reduce dependency on imports. And National Biopharma Mission is a collaboration of Department of Biotechnology with World Bank, and it is being led by the BIRAC. So as we all know, the last 2 years were very challenging for all of us, and our government took several measures to make India self-reliant to face the challenges. So during that period, fast-track mechanism were devised for supporting research, promoting funding, overcoming regulatory and scale-up hurdles, and augmentation of manufacturing facilities and efficient deployment. And many of points were covered by Dr. Kiran in her interview. So in the current scenario, it is very, very important to ensure that we make ourselves ready for any future challenge. So amalgamation of knowledge, skill, and technology, and the part was discussed and presented by Dr. Mashelkar also, is a major challenge, and this needs to be addressed to be a future ready. And our startup scientists must be prepared to lead innovation in the country and focus on out-of-the-box solutions through interdisciplinary cutting-edge team-based research. And therefore, now it is very important to focus on a vibrant and integrated bio-innovation ecosystem. So ecosystem has been created. How to take this ecosystem to the next level? And that is the challenge, and also at the same time, we all have to work together in an integrated approach with the government. And that can be also supported by enabling regulatory and IP policy. And it is also important to build and nurture partnership both and in the country and as well as across the nations. So this event which we are here today has provided a platform by bringing together key stakeholders, experts, and we can see that wide variety of the program which has been designed for this kind of event. It is providing a platform for all stakeholders to exchange ideas and also deliberate upon global trends in science and technology, opportunities for India, and chart the future trajectory of India's bioeconomy. So I am sure that deliberations during this 2-day event would be very useful in coming out with a future course of action for building a next generation bioeconomy in India. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Dipanvita.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. So I would request Alka to actually felicitate Chandrasekhar Nair by giving this badge of honor. You know, I was wondering, I have to tell you, I was wondering what gift can I give him that he will not have? And then we did a medallion, like with an IKP logo. This is a place where you can do very good minakari. So this is for Chandrasekhar. This is.
So this is for you. So this is, there is no, okay. Okay, then you can just wear this. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So you carry a little bit of IKP with you.
With me, yes. Absolutely.
So, and
You will not
Yeah, I would love to say.
yeah, thank you.
First of all, I'm immensely humbled and honored. And thanks, Deepanita. You know our journey. You've seen it from the very beginning. And in many, many respects, this is not our journey alone. Dr. Mashelkar was here a few minutes ago, was responsible for us getting an immediate funding at a time when nobody thought that we could make a portable PCR in this country. But the funding was not just the funding, it also gave us access to people like Professor Padmanabhan, Dr. Ganguly, Professor Mohan Rao. I've never heard one negative word from them during their entire course of this 5-year mentorship with Nimitli. And then we had Dr. Ban, who believed in us when the BIPP program started and funded us to do validation with quite a few parameters. Then, of course, our partnership with ICMR, first with H1N1 and then with TB to generate evidence for India, and ICMR's partnership with FIND to generate evidence for the world to get a WHO approval for a product from India, I think just shows you that we've kind of just followed that ecosystem. And I must tell you that first 5 years of our existence from 2000 to 2005, before we got the Nimitli funding, was the most interesting because nobody knew how to fund us as a private company. And look where we have come today. I think we are today at that inflection point, and there are so many systems that have collaborated together to bring us to this inflection point. I see tremendous hope for entrepreneurs from India to make global impact. And this is what I would definitely see in the next 5 or 6 years, I believe. Thank you very much. Thanks for this honor. Yeah.
Thank you, Chandra. A big hand for
Thanks.
Molbio
Thank you.
and- So with this, we'll start the panel discussion, but we cannot start a panel discussion without giving a small part of IKP to BIRAC, because what we have received from BIRAC, right from when it was not BIRAC, it was BIRAP and BIRAP. And Utkarsh, you'll remember those days with Dr. Bhan and some of us sitting together, putting the draft for what it is BIRAC. So you, a little bit of, so now we request the first panel to start. And can we have Utkarsh Palnitkar and the 4 speakers, please? Dhananjay. So you'll announce the names here. Dr. Dhananjay Patankar. Mr. Girish Kapoor. Thank you, Girish. Aditya Sharma, please. And Dr. Venkatramana. Oh, you're here. Utkarsh, all yours.
Namaskar and good afternoon. Let me thank IKMC for giving us an opportunity to discuss an aspirational topic at an inspirational conference. Over the last 16 years, IKMC has evolved into a meeting place, and I think what everyone looks forward to is really, the exchange of ideas, and that is largely due to the camaraderie that Deepanvita has personally built over these last 20 years, right? What makes IKMC a little different and special is, its theme-based conferences, which are always a little ahead of time. The panel this afternoon has been mandated to deliberate upon what would it take to make India a global biosimilars hub. So any strategy is only as good as the objective that it aims to achieve. And clearly, before us, we have an objective that is truly worth aspiring for. The prize is pretty large. It's reckoned that by 2030, the global biosimilars market is expected to be around $90 billion US. So any large prize attracts a number of players. So it's not just us, the competition is intense. We have, of course, for inspiration, our success story in generics, and that's where the story stops. Because to begin with, and we are in the T20 World Cup, the pitch is very different. There is no comparison, in terms of what we've achieved in small molecules and what we hope to achieve in biosimilars. And therefore, we'll obviously need a different strategy, not just to capture volume, but value market share. Again, India has a bit of an advantage. We were amongst the earliest to have guidelines for biosimilars, which have been updated in 2016. Dr. Alka Sharma just talked about the National Biopharma Mission, which is 3 planks in terms of biosimilars, vaccines, and upgradation of infrastructure. The government of Telangana has recently announced a bioprocessing development facility. Yet, in spite of all this, India's share of the global biosimilars market is still very modest. So given our ambition to dominate the space, what strategies would we need? What are the imperatives that we would need to adopt? What regulatory changes would need to be assured in? To provide us with a possible roadmap, we have a very eminent panel with us. Dipanvita has already mentioned them to you. You have them in your program. So let me just jump into the questions that we should pose to this panel. So possibly I could come here. So one way to begin this conversation and look at it is the opportunity. And you could break that up into perhaps 4 large buckets. One is being a merchant manufacturer. The second is being a CDMO. The third possible one is captive units of global companies who set up shop in India. And possibly the fourth is where these are small enterprises who develop new products and then out-license them to either domestic or global players. So in that context, given this is the breakup of the pie, where do you see the opportunity for India? Dhananjay, if I may begin with you.
So biosimilars, my experience is more in the biosimilars and the CDMO business, and I think these are the top 2 for sort of creating the environment for the other 2 to follow, perhaps. You won't have a foreign company setting up their facility here until the Indian ecosystem itself with Indian investment matures. I think today we have sort of a small beginning. There are now half a dozen companies that have biosimilar approvals in regulated markets. We need to scale that up both in terms of the number of companies and also their share of the overall market. And then the CMO business also, there's a handful of companies that are now that have entered this field, but again, they need to become more prominent globally compared to where they are now.
Right. You mentioned about a handful of companies here in India, and the Indian sort of sector has to grow to attract investments from outside. One of the challenges that we face is the total market size. The market size itself is in India a little modest, and you have competition growing with a number of players coming out. And Dr. Sharma mentioned, and one of the key drawbacks that we have is we still don't have government procurement of biopharmaceuticals. So how will we grow that? How will we attract investments?
So that is clearly a problem because, and that's a problem for across the board, including the other 2 segments that you talked about where foreign companies investing here or startups, is that everybody, for your business case to work, it has to be export driven because the Indian market is just not big enough to on its own create a viable business case for you, especially with, there's a limited number of biosimilar products. And everybody is kind of fighting for that small share. So you talked about government procurement, widening of the insurance and, those kinds of areas. One other area that I think could be useful is export to sort of emerging economies through, potentially one way for that would be for the government to enter into what I would call as mutual recognition type arrangements where, let's say, clinical trials done in India or approvals in India could be accepted sort of as is in some of those emerging markets that will ease the path for Indian manufacturers to supply to those countries. Because obviously you can't conduct 100 clinical trials across the world to enter into 100 countries.
Sure. So, one of the ways, and we have a company right here in Hyderabad that has demonstrated that you can do both. You can be a CDMO business as well as a merchant manufacturer. And I'm talking of DV's laboratories, of course, in the API space. So, Venkat, do you see a similar opportunity for biosimilars company where you have your own merchant production, you have your own products, as well as act as a CDMO, whilst, you try to bridge the gap of a small market?
That's an interesting question, but to me, in a short run, you can do that. You could be a CDMO, you can manufacture for some other company. But as we see, there's a lot of crunch for capacity now. Even I know companies are struggling to push a clinical trial batch into their manufacturing pipeline. So it's okay. Probably it will work in a short term. But more than biosimilars, I think you'll have huge opportunity for gene therapy products. Right. The reason is worldwide there's a big shortage of manufacturing capacity for gene therapy. Again, Indian companies probably would, in a short term, look at gene therapy as an option of manufacturing, but ultimately they would be full with their own products. So my take on that is, right, yes, on a short term, that's a good idea.
Right. If we look at the kind of capabilities that we need in India, cost effectiveness is critical if we have to get in this space, and of course the versatility of products. So Aditya, you work with a number of companies, both who are manufacturing as well as CDMOs. How cost effective are we, or what needs to be done for us to remain competitive?
Thank you, Utkarsh. My experience has been that, and what Dr. Mashelka was talking about, how do we stop becoming incremental and how do we pole vault really? Yeah. So the discussions which we have with many of the companies we work with, they are doing tremendous job in trying to bring down the cost, but they need to look at what are the other ways to do it rather than thinking that how do you buy products in a more cost-effective way. Can you look at your upstream, for an example, and do you bring the productivity up and bring down your cost by half or one-third? The other aspect is that do you look at the process in a completely new way? How do you optimize your process? How do you compress the process? Or can you take more batches in the same time, in the same facility, and try to implement some of those technologies through different processes? So I think, in my opinion, it would be important for the industry to look at some of these. Again, I will steal from what Dr. Mashelka was saying, that how do we bring the next practice rather than looking at the best practice? Yeah.
So you talked about upstream. Interestingly, at this point of time, and I'll be happy to be corrected, 50 to 60% of manufacturing cell lines are being imported. So shouldn't our focus be on upstream, on focusing on developing cell lines in India itself, rather than focusing more on the manufacturing process? Venkat, your take on that?
Again, that's a tough question. So these cell lines, one option is to import cell line which is already engineered with an antibody or a protein of interest. That's relatively fast. The other option is, what if you get a platform wherein you can engineer any protein that you like? That would make your pipeline very robust and you're not dependent on a service provider. And I know Indian companies follow both these options depending on their appetite for technology and licensing. It's a good idea that India should have its own cell line. I know in government laboratories this work is being happening, but that requires again some guidance from a regulatory standpoint, how you derive the cell line, what kind of tests need to be done, and how to ensure that the manufacturers ultimately accept this, and regulators accept the cell line, because the history is very critical. But that's something I think we should look at, and a huge opportunity available for that.
Right. Please, go ahead.
So I think while we talk about manufacturing, there is a lot of discussion at several forums about continuous manufacturing setups as well. So while we do most of the times batch manufacturing, I think it's time to pole vault, as Dr. Mashelkar said, from batch manufacturing to continuous manufacturing. And I think that's the future if we want to make India a biosimilar hub. And that's how we increase the productivity by 10 or 20 times, and then also reduce the cost, thereby making ourselves cost competitive. And I think USP as an organization also is trying all the models where we can adopt continuous manufacturing. Of course, that requires a lot of funding, and I think we have all the right people here in this conference, and also several other forums where we can tap into those kind of opportunities where it will be easier to move towards new technologies like continuous manufacturing. Now that comes with its own pros and cons. We always say that there is a lot of human intervention at several stages, and that decreases the speed, and also up to some extent would also limit the scale at which we want to grow.
Right.
So if we want to move towards from batch to continuous manufacturing, I think there is also an element of digitization and automation which would come into picture, so that we can less of human intervention, more the processes are digitized and automated. I think that will increase the speed. That will also take us to the next level in terms of scale, so that we can manufacture more in terms of volumes, and also diversify the portfolio of biosimilars which we have right now. So we launched the first biosimilar in 2000, I believe, and now we have more than 100, but I think most of it is still restricted for use in the domestic market, right? So it's not for export or the global consumption.
Right.
So I think that's the kind of opportunity which exists, like Utkarsh, you said 90 billion. So what pie of that 90 billion we want to grab on, and what would take us there? I think technology would definitely take us there. So we need to think of, in that terms as well.
Right. Just rounding off our conversation, if I may, on the market, and then of course we'll move to the other factors that are relevant, is, on the 14th of September this year, the US announced its national biotech and biomanufacturing policy. Actually, Dr. Sharma, it's very similar to your national biopharma mission, but on a little larger scale, if I may. So now what's going to happen is, it's not just supply chain, they're talking about domestic manufacturing in the US, they're looking at procurement from the US. Wouldn't that act as another trade barrier, Dhananjay? Bigger hurdle to cross?
Possibly. I mean, it's still very fresh, and we don't know how it will play out. Sort of politically, it is somewhat aimed at reducing the influence of perhaps China, and maybe it will hit countries like Korea a little bit more, because they are already very prominent in terms of manufacturing. Right. So to that extent, I think we have some ways to go, and I'm not, I don't think it may have that much of an impact. Having said that, I think we have to do what we have to do, right? Sure. I mean, we can't sit around thinking, oh, US has done that, I'm now my chances are, dimmed or something like this. Because if we sit back and sort of get into that pessimism, then we are guaranteed not to make progress, right? The only chance we have of making progress is to say, forget about what US is doing. I need to do what I need to do. Sure. And, maybe we need our own biomanufacturing initiative, perhaps, in terms of finding out what's, what are the hurdles, what are the frictions, what are the gaps, and really plugging those gaps. What's preventing us from doing more? You talked about cell lines, technology, regulation. I think that's one area. Although regulation has improved over the last many years, I must say that. it's still not, I mean, there are still challenges, particularly for CMOs, because CMOs are in a much more dynamic environment, things change. They aren't able to predict, what they're going to be doing 2 or 3 years from now. And I think our current regulation is not quite sort of conducive to that dynamically changing scenarios. So there are some things that can be done on that front as well.
Sure. Aditya, you had a point to make.
So my point was that we have been talking about the market, and we are saying that it's a 90 billion market. Where is this 90 billion market, right? And what? Yeah, so essentially it's in the developed world. If we have to go and compete there and get the pie, then what is that we need to do? The second part is, if India is a small market, and of course affordability is a big factor there, then how do we make India itself is a larger market? If you see the success in China was that most of the biosimilar companies in China, first the market was in China, and now they are thinking of going out, companies like Wuxi, and targeting setting up facilities outside and targeting the other market. So I think for us, one is that how do we make India as a larger market? We're such a large population, so many of patients here. And then the point is that who would pay for it? It's not a cheap treatment. Who would pay for it? And if government has to pay, then where the government will get the money from to pay for this, right? So I think those are some of the questions. And when we say that how India becomes a biosimilar hub, the question is that what is that we want to do? If we become the biosimilar hub, are we the biosimilar factory of the world? Like what in Korea, between 2 companies, they are planning to set up close to 10 lakh liter of capacity. Or we are thinking of having our own products, which we are selling in the developed world, and then how to go there. I think these are some of the questions probably which as the industry needs to see, and then what is that they need to do to accomplish some of it.
So you talked about, India attracting investments, and I'll be absolutely thrilled and delighted to be corrected. But to my mind, there's not a single global biopharmaceutical company that manufactures its products from India at this point of time. So if we are to become a compelling destination for biosimilars, what is it that we'll have to accomplish? What are the elements of friction that will have to be removed? You talked about Korea, talk about LG, talk about Samsung, talk about Celltrion. Talk about, it's counterintuitive. Thermo Fisher is setting up a huge facility in Switzerland for biosimilars manufacturing, which they have taken over from CSL. So any of you guys, what are the 3 things that we need to do? If these 3 things first we need to do to take away the friction. Venkat, could we start with you?
I think my favorite topic is training. So we have a lot of biotech courses in India, but when we hire them, we really have to do a lot of training, maybe a year before they can, excuse me, they can be deployed in manufacturing. We're good at R&D, but when it comes to manufacturing, you have aseptic technology, and you have, running these bioreactors without batch failures, and also compliance to the regulation. I think these are some of the things if they are exposed to before they come to industry, I think that's very useful. And it happened in pharma, so why can't it happen in biotech? It will.
So I would say whatever we have discussed. So the foundation of everything, at least to start with, it comes with talent. And talent is something which we should nurture, we should grow, we should develop, and then take it to that level where we are ready to use or leverage that talent for India becoming a biosimilar hub. When we talk about drug development, and I think in generics we have seen that we are now called the pharmacy of the world, wherein more than 40% of the generics sold in US come from India. So that's there. But if you see, I think on the other side, especially on the biologics and biosimilars, so drug development is a very complex process, and it's not related to one discipline. It involves pronged approach in terms of you should know something about pharmacology, you should know about toxicology, you should know about clinical trials, you should know about economics, and you should know about law, you should know about pharmaceutics. So all those factors come into play. So do we have those kind of courses which are running in, say, academia, which make our talent coming out of the universities industry ready? And
So
I think,
Girish, what's your prescription?
yeah, so I think this is validated by NSDC as well, that we need more of academia industry interaction, wherein industry experts can go to academia and also find time to nurture that talent and explain what is going on in the industry so that that bridge can be gapped, that gap can be bridged.
Right.
So that's, I think, one major thing which industry needs to do. And we have seen that industry-academia partnerships exist, but I think most of them, I think, are, say, 1 year long or 2 years long, or maybe at the max, say, 3 years. Whereas if we are talking about a full-fledged ecosystem, I think we need something where we have the POC ideas coming from the academia, then there is a startup ecosystem wherein we can nurture it further. And then we are looking forward to some of the industry leaders to act as mentors to take it further to commercialization. I think that kind of value chain, if we develop, those kind of hubs need to be there where these three components are integrated very well. Of course, supported by government initiatives. So that would further help us. So there are so many courses, but all those are running, say, in silos. So we need to somehow integrate that knowledge which exists maybe in different pieces. So once we integrate that, we know that this is how the big picture looks like, and this is where academia is, this is where industry is, this is the gap, and all of us need to do our bit. For example, we do a lot of courses with NIPER. Our experts go there and talk about drug development, talk about computational biology, talk about informatics. Right? So those are the few things in terms of as far as talent is concerned.
So I want to talk about one thing that we have not talked about at all is marketing and brand building.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, business is about what you can sell. I mean, you can create facilities, you can invest, you can create talent. And we have some of that. Of course, it needs to scale. There are many things to be fixed there. But I think there is also a gap as far as marketing and branding is concerned. And I think that has to be done by, of course, individual companies are doing it for their own sort of products or services. But at the industry association level, at the government level, at various other levels, we need to do that, because even as a CMO, when we approach, let's say, a Western company, they perceive that there's a risk in getting their product manufactured in India, right? I mean, they come in, they look at your talent, they look at your facilities, they're sort of broadly satisfied, but they still feel that there's a risk. And perhaps in their mind, the lower price is sort of a compensation for that risk that they're taking. So we need to change that perspective, right? Even from our side, I think we almost, we don't use these exact words, but largely the message we give out is that, we are not bad, so, please come to us. We need to change that and really give out the message that we are actually very good. And they shouldn't feel that there's a risk in coming to India. Instead, they should feel that, in fact, it's a very robust decision for them to secure their, clinical or commercial supplies if they come to India, because there is talent, there is scale, there's capability, there's knowledge, there's the, supply chain, raw materials. So we need to create that marketing sort of a push, brand building push, where the way you have for, let's say, an IT or a vaccine, right? There's a general feeling
we need a Devang Mehta, late Devang Mehta.
We need a Devang Mehta for
Biopharma.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with an IT, I mean, there's a general assumption that if it's coming out of India, they're really good at it.
Right.
Or for vaccines, if it's coming out of India, they're really good at it.
Right.
But that same perception doesn't exist for biotherapeutics or these other biologics, and we need to create that.
Sure. I have one final question before I, go to the audience. About 40 odd questions, but we'll be here all evening. We have a proliferation of young enterprises today in India. But what happens is, if they have to get to clinical trial production, where do they go? guys like, Syngene, Anthem won't even give them the time of the day. So, whilst you come up to that level, what happens next? So what kind of partnerships that we can look at, maybe in a PPP model to set up bio-manufacturing facilities for such enterprises? Also, you don't see, an interaction between the large players and young enterprises. So Dipanvita, with 1,300 enterprises, perhaps we need to create an enterprise exchange in India today. Rather than, so how do we build these parts? Otherwise, there'll be, all this euphoria which has been built up will come crashing down. Any of you?
So as a, having worked in a CMO, I can say that it comes down to money, right? Syngene will give them the time of the day if they put down money on the table, right, which they often can't, right? So, right. So as far as startups are concerned, it really, becomes a question of are they getting funded enough to take it to that next level? Because, ultimately, if they have to even license out their product, they can't be cutting corners on development or manufacturing. Absolutely. They really have to do it at the top standard. And while India is cost competitive and there are some definite cost advantages in India, we can't make it about cost, right? We can't be focusing on cost all the time. The cost advantage will automatically come if we focus on the process excellence overall.
Right. So we'll take a couple of questions and try to save some time. There's one more session after this and only then lunch. So we have
Utkarsh,
Dr. Alka Sharma there, and she has the mic. Fantastic.
So actually, I'm happy to see the kind of discussion we are having. I missed that point in my remarks regarding biomanufacturing. So under the leadership of new Secretary, Dr. Rajesh S. Gokhale, so we started discussing this maybe 3-4 months now, and to develop a big program around biomanufacturing in the country, across the country. And it was a coincidence that we actually heard about biomanufacturing, that news came from that US that they have, and the US government. And now that we have prepared a white paper for biomanufacturing to be submitted to the government further. And that has actually, based on the discussion with stakeholders, that how this can be done with the kind of scenario which has been discussed in the country, and that we are facing that the same challenges actually after having discussion with many stakeholders and also startups industry, that operation cost, capital cost, and how to match with that, and what is the difference, and how to bring all of them on the same platform that they can actually build that exactly the way it is being discussed, that to have some visibility. And the biomanufacturing is the area which biotechnology department has to see. Otherwise, no other department in the country that can address this biomanufacturing. And that is as per the mandate of Department of Biotechnology. We are taking this and with full-fledged motion with the government, and we are now presenting to the various forum and also at the highest level that how to get more funds dedicated to biomanufacturing. So that is almost that white paper has been prepared, but the thing is that now how to take this further to the next financial year. So I missed that point in my remarks, but this is being done. So I wanted to share this information with all of you here in the audience.
Yeah,
so,
we'll take one question.
I'll just say, thank you very much. We look forward to seeing this biomanufacturing policy come out. Apart from funding, please look into the regulatory aspects because it's all about removing hurdles and frictions wherever they are. And there are some that can be taken care of on that side as well.
Sure. We have just time for one more question. Yes, sir. And could you also identify which panelists you would like to have your question answered?
All the gurus on the panel,
Right,
and
right.
I personally work with every one of them.
Right.
So my question is very simple. I'm Raghavendra Gaud Waggu. I was actually leading Cytiva till last month. I've changed from Cytiva, as you all know, is G Healthcare, and then it was Amishan Pharmacia. So I was there for about 25 years and just left that place. My question is very simple. When you talk about the entire workflow of the manufacturing, today almost 95 to 98% of the material has to come from outside. I'm talking about the raw materials that go into the whatever you call, biotherapeutics, vaccines, and things like that. If you have to put the perspective in terms of localization of the raw materials, where do we as India stand now? And what is that one thing that you want to see if you want to adapt some of these localized products in your processes? And any of the guru can answer this.
We have actually seen a lot of challenges during pandemic for, resins, media. Then we realized, excuse me, it's good if somebody can make them in India, okay? So that's something I believe, we new entrepreneurs can take up, considering how much important they are for the manufacturing, and also what kind of compliance are required, for these matrices and media. So that's also will ease a lot of price pressures. These are imported at a very huge cost from abroad. So that's something we can look at.
No, you hit upon a very valid point, and this was accentuated during COVID, where there were several items in the supply chain missing. But we've experienced this before. We've had airports come up and roads leading to the airports come up later. But eventually we do get there. In the question and answer session, I was wondering whether anyone would ask, it's great, what will it take to become the Biosimilars Hub? Nobody asked the question when. Thankfully, we have some liberty of pegging that date, but unfortunately, I don't have any such liberty. My time is completely run out. So please join me in thanking this wonderful panel.
And with this, I would like to quickly invite the next panel discussion, Mr. G.S. Krishnan, moderator for the session. And Mr. Krishna Mohan, Regional President, Novozymes, and Dr. Jugnu Jain, and Mr. Subramanian, popularly known as Subbu. Please. Over to you, sir.
Very good afternoon, and sorry we are keeping you waiting for the lunch. In fact, I had requested the organizers if it should be postponed, but then happy that they said probably this should be an appetizer for lunch. That's what I hope. So you will not be angry, you will be more hungry. That's what I expect. Thanks very much to IKP, especially Dr. Dipanvita and the organizers for giving us an opportunity. I'm representing ABLE. And ABLE, as Kiran mentioned, have been putting the roadmap together on the opportunities and her vision we all heard. I would like to take it from there. We feel that definitely there's a very big opportunity, and we have Dr. Alka Sharma with us. DBT's target is, from what we are today, about $80 billion US. They are expecting $300 billion by 2030. So I think this number is something they believe in, and we have to make it happen. So with this, our particular session basically talks about the emerging opportunities. And of course, every time when there is an opportunity, there's always a challenge. But I would like to put down the challenges and look at more at the opportunities today. And what I would like to say is we have a very distinguished panel where we have a mix of somebody from the industrial biotech segment, enzyme manufacturing company, and we have a serial entrepreneur, Subramani, and we also have Dr. Jugnu again from the Sapien Biosciences. So we have a mix of opportunities coming from, for example, the bioenergy, we are talking about the smart proteins, and of course also the medtech, and I think this is where we would like to concentrate. Of course, one of the speakers could not make it today for us. What I would like to start with is to talk about a few areas which we feel will be very critical as an opportunity which India should take advantage of. To start with, I would like to talk about the smart proteins. I think most of you would have heard, and Kiran also mentioned about synthetic biology. This is one area India has been the preferred destination. And I should tell you all, Bangalore has already 2 of the startups from the Bay Area who are utilizing the capabilities in Bangalore to set up a sort of R&D facility. And also one of the companies are utilizing the local manufacturing capabilities to produce smart protein. So this is one area we feel is going to definitely support the overall target of the $300 billion. And especially, we feel in the next 3 to 5 years, we are looking at a 10 million fermentation capacity facility to be set up, which will have an investment of $500 million, which will have a revenue of almost $1 billion. Apart from this, the job creation and the other opportunities which it's going to provide for Indian context. This is one opportunity we feel that could be set up anywhere in India, provided the local state governments are taking advantage of this situation and provide the infrastructure. Something you will hear more from some of the panelists over here. The bioenergy segment, India has already taken a good leap by having the first, the bioenergy or the biorefinery facility, which was inaugurated by the Prime Minister on August 15th. It is actually set up by the Indian Oil Corporation. In fact, there are 3 such facilities coming up, which probably will take care of our target for E20, which will be by 2025. This is one thing which the world is watching. India could turn around the whole situation of the biofuel segment in a manner we could have an opportunity to export. This is again indigenous technology which has been used. Praj Industry is the technology provider for this, and as we all know, biomass conversion is something which is a big challenge, and it's the conversion of this biomass which is the sort of step which is required, which is what Praj is providing, with of course enzymes playing a very critical role. Both these segments, biotech is a very big opportunity, and of course we will hear more on the opportunities from the pharma segment. With this, I would like to introduce the panelists today with us, and we will have more questions and answers from you all probably in the next half an hour or 40 minutes. We have with us Dr. Jugnu Jain, co-founder and CEO, Sapien Biosciences. Thanks for joining. We have Subramani Ramchandrappa, founder and board member, Laurus Bio, and founder, Firmbox. You will hear more from his experience on the smart protein segment. We have Krishnamohan Puvada, regional president and managing director from Novozymes. He's going to talk on decarbonization and One Health and the opportunity there. With this, I would like to invite each of the panelists to speak about the opportunities for the next 3 to 4 minutes. Each of them will have an opportunity to speak on 3 to 4 minutes. If you'd like to use slides, please do so. And then after that, we can probably go around for further round of question and answers. With this, I will start with Dr. Jugnu Jain. Over to you.
I was happy to hear about Indian Oil. In your comments, my father worked with Indian Oil for all his life. So I am an Indian Oil fan and a loyal consumer of Indian oil. So good to hear. So thank you for having me for this session. I think I see more opportunities than challenges. Of course, there are challenges. I think this is an area in biotherapeutics where India has made a huge mark in vaccines. Everybody knows we can make them in bulk, we can provide them anywhere in the world. So the question when we talk of biotherapeutics is, are we doing small molecules or are we doing large molecules? Drug discovery is by and large very similar. I come from a drug pharma background, And Vertex Pharmaceuticals, my former company, we worked a lot in small molecules. The manufacturing and the isolation and the regulatory part is a little bit easier. When you come to large molecules, the processing, the manufacturing, the quality becomes a little bit harder. And so one has to pay attention to that. But as I said, India has a lot of experience with vaccines. So then the issue is really, are we going to focus on generics or are we going to go to innovation? In both areas, whether it is biosimilars or whether it is drugs, India has made a mark as the pharmaceutical pharmacy to the world, mostly in the generics. So that is capturing only a small part of the world market. So the opportunity here, if we were to look at biotherapeutics, is that there are many advantages of going for biomolecules. You can bridge two very large targets using antibodies or other kinds of linkers, something that small molecules can't. The half-life of biological molecules is very long, unlike small molecules where you have to dose pretty much every day. So there are lots of opportunities and pros of going for biomolecules. And I would say there, a large opportunity for India is that we have a very large population, right? We're the second in the world. We have a very diverse country, again, very large. We have a lot of diseased patients who are treatment naive. If we are to go into innovation in drug discovery, whether it is biologicals, whether it is small molecules, we need to understand our disease biology. So there is a tremendous opportunity to really study disease biology, identify targets that are appropriate for our population, understand why resistance happens when you give drugs, whether small molecules or antibodies, and really build that database, that digital database, which I think we don't have. We still use Western data and still tailor drugs based on that. And I think that is a lacuna which can become an opportunity. I'm part of a think tank that talks a lot about CAR T therapy. And there also there was a discussion, should we first replicate what's already been done or should we go for new targets? And very wisely, Dr. Rahul Purwar and his group at IIT Bombay and now in other places, they felt first we should replicate and become perfect in what has been done in the world. But that is the first step. That is not the last step. So they are already talking about discovering new antigens, new targeting approaches, and that is where I think our biologicals capacity, experience, can really be a game changer. Because for rare diseases, for many kinds of diseases, the way you can personalize medicine using biologicals, you cannot do with small molecules. So that I see as a major opportunity. Of course, I'll talk about other things later.
Thank you. Over to you, Mohan.
Thank you, Krishan. So from when we look in terms of where are we in terms of the world and what the whole transformation is taking place, I think there is a very, very clear need for how things are produced and how things are to be consumed. And I want to talk about the climate change, the SDG goals, and the whole decarbonization efforts that is right in front of us. We are living through a lot of those challenges on a daily basis, especially in the emerging countries. Now, if you think in terms of what is lying ahead of us and what has taken us so far to get to this place, the same things will not take us forward into the future. So we need to fundamentally relook at how things are produced, consumed, and luckily there, from an India standpoint of view, we can take the opportunity to get it right the first time, because a lot of the future is not yet built. So if we take the first right steps, then I think we are in a great position forward. Now let me talk a little bit in terms of what are we looking towards. Energy security and big thing, because if you have an ambition of a 5 trillion, 10 trillion, energy is a very, very vital. Now, how do you get there? How do you make sure that you connect the problems that are there in the country, bring in all of that into one place and make things happen? And this is where I think the future of India will gain, where there is a lot more collaboration between the academia, the technology providers, entrepreneurs, and everybody out there. So one big thing from a policy change that we need to look at is we need to stop subsidizing the past. Our economy is based on a lot of subsidies which worked in the past, but they need not work into the future. We need to invest into the future. And this is where biology, biologics, biotechnology, all of these things needs to come. So investing into the future, that is something that India can take that opportunity. Stop subsidizing of the past. And a lot of India has to be built. Let's accept the fact that when you're looking 20, 30, 50 years ahead, it's not yet built. We don't have capacities. We don't have this infrastructure. We have to build it. Let's build the infrastructure, the capacities in a low carbon pathways. Right? It is so easy to do it because you're building into the future. You don't have to undo the past. You have to build it right the first time. So low carbon pathways, which also means, borrowing Dr. Mashelkar's statement, it is an opportunity for us to pole vault by adopting a few of these things. Now, that's a little bit on the whole decarbonization efforts, but very, very important because all countries have committed towards these targets.
Thank you very much, Mohan. Over to you, Subbu.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Dipanvita, Mr. Krishnan, and this forum for having me over. I'm an entrepreneur, so I don't have much to advise the country. I'm going to tell you what worked for me and what I'm seeing as opportunities in the areas that I'm working on, and why it's like really awesome for anybody who's thinking of multi-billion-dollar economy in India. They should look at the opportunity I'm looking at. So I'm going to be very specific to what worked for me and what I want to do. So I'm sure it would at least give a new dimension to all the biologics we are talking about. So when I started this company like 15 years ago, of course, there was, like Chandrasekhar said, there was really no BIRAC, there was no funding. The bankers would talk to me like, we are a cement company, they needed a balance sheet. There was no VC activity, but I got lucky. I went to ISB for a year, and then 7 years after that, Venture East, which is Hyderabad, Chennai based, they invested. Mr. Mittal is here, he's part of my journey too. And it was very interesting. So we started as a company which made enzyme applications by buying enzymes from Novozymes and others and creating our own space. So our focus was to not get stuck into this whole clinical trials, high funding kind of business because we didn't have access to funds. So it was clearly bootstrapped company. So we always stayed kind of below the radar, and we found our calling when we started making animal-free products to make medicine safer. In fact, I can proudly say that Biocon's human insulin program is completely running on our recombinant trypsin, which otherwise they were buying from a Chinese source produced in a pigsty, right? Because porcine products were used in making insulin or in vaccines or in many other medicines. So we became a company which made medicines better by making recombinant proteins whose science is very similar to making insulin or making a vaccine or making so many other things. We use the same science, but we stayed under the radar of getting into clinical trials, approvals, regulatory, because we didn't have the money. Having done that, we realized that this was really big. So right now, more than 90% of our products are exported, other than a few Indian biologics companies and vaccine companies in India, which is small. Most of it goes out. So we're kind of best kept secret in India because we make some really cool animal-free products, and we did that for several years. And then we realized that we were in the middle of a revolution of smart proteins. Because first, as you know, like NASA makes something for space and then it becomes a toaster. Technology came down. Similar things happened in biotech, I would say. Mammalian cell culture happened. Now we are talking about cultured meat. Recombinant proteins for biologics happened. Now we are talking about novel proteins from fermentation. Now, since we always operated below the radar of clinical trials and regulatory, this became an opportunity for us. And if I say more than 40 different novel protein companies are currently scaling up their processes at our Tumkur plant, which we built in 8 months during COVID, you won't be surprised. You should come and see this. Secondly, this comes under food licenses. Now, talk about biomanufacturing. Look all over the world. The largest cell culture facility could be like, fermenter could be 20 or 30,000 liters. The largest microbial fermentation for biologics may be 100, 150,000. But we are thinking of building the next one, which is 2 million liter capacity, and it's going to come up in the next 12 months. For 12 years, we operated a plant with 10,000 liters of fermentation. And in the last 2 years, we went to 200,000 and now going to 2 million liters. So the point I'm making is smart proteins, especially for food, for synthetic biology, to replace materials which came from natural sources like forests or anything where we would take away from our nature. Like he said, how we are going to produce food for the future or materials for the future is going to define our future. And I think India, for the first time, is in the front line. We don't have to chase innovative biologics with biosimilars. We don't have to chase innovative small molecules with generics. In smart proteins, we are in the front line. And we have the expertise because we did biosimilars. We had a cost advantage. We have the people. All that we need now is not even money. So my call out to the government is just show us where to build the plant and give us some support there, because money is available. This is profitable business. The risk is low. In fact, anything that the government can do to allow industries to put up quickly with less red tape, it will work. And that's where the biggest opportunity is. I just want to highlight here, because I can't resist but to say it. We talked about $90 billion opportunity for biosimilars. This is a 1.2 trillion business opportunity by 2037. Now, this is as big as it gets, and we could be the farmers of the world through biotech. We could be the synthetic biology company of the world through biotech. And I think that's where the great opportunity. Challenges are, we need to train them. Like in the earlier panel, they said biomanufacturing is a wave, but we have a lot of edtech happening and upskilling. In fact, that's something we should start looking at. Thank you.
Thanks, Subbu. Before you put down, one quick question. We have been hearing in the smart protein area, the scale up, the overall yield challenges are still existing, and there are some of the companies who are working on that. What's your comment on that?
I think there are two things which will define any biomanufacturing cost. One is your upstream yields, two is your downstream losses. And most importantly, when you keep making bigger fermenters, it's your variable cost. Now, if you're making food products, you're making, say, casein without cows, or you're making egg white without chicken, or you're making gelatin without bones, you need to adapt your raw materials from using the typical biopharma ingredients to more alternative raw materials. And what I'm seeing in the West is they're not spending enough time there. And I think with our Indian mindset on managing costs, we should be able to use the 2G sugars. In fact, I'm hoping we can get some of the 2G sugars from IOCL and use it to make proteins, because they are more valuable than growing ethanol for cars, right? If you then look at yields per se, I think we have a great advantage now, Europe being highly expensive in terms of power, in terms of manpower, US not having the same capability as us. And I think the cost factor, if you're targeting a $10 product, is a challenge. But if you make any synthetic biology products which is about $35 per kilogram, it is viable. In fact, we are making these products. So it's proof tested. So anyone making synthetic bio novel proteins which can be sold about $30, $35,
this is a viable business.
So one correction, you're talking about the ethanol manufactured from sugar. We are talking about more about the biomass, but you can take all the sugars, no problem. But we are talking about the biomass.
You can have the biomass.
Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Jugnu. And you were talking about the captive market here in the Indian context for the biomolecules. And where do you think is the challenge? Because already, of course, biosimilars, something similar to this was spoken about. What's your take on where is the challenge?
So I think affordability still remains a major challenge, and I think the cost of goods needs to go down for affordability to go up. Also, I don't know, the insurance coverage in India is still not very high, so people are paying out of pocket. That certainly changes their affordability. We recently have a paper accepted for publication in breast cancer, for example, where we found in corporate hospitals like Apollo, if we were to look at the treatment and outcomes, the outcomes are as good as what are reported abroad. So why is that? It's probably because the people coming in, women, are more educated. They are more aware about their health. They probably go for screening if they find something odd faster. Probably the treatment is given quicker without losing time through various diagnoses. And most probably also that the treatments that are world-class are available and affordable and hence used. So I think that is encouraging to know that if we can level the playing field, the outcomes can be as good in India. So the other problem with the biotherapeutics is that the number of players are still very small, cost of goods is high, and also biomanufacturing. That process is complicated, and how to get approvals for them, the regulatory framework, there is still lack of transparency and consistency there, is what I hear from the industry. So if we are to have more players, but also more treatments that are tailored to the patient, so you're not wasting giving a drug that's not needed for that patient, cost of treatment will come down. So more personalized medicine.
Thank you. Bon, you mentioned about the infrastructure, and the other part is collaboration between industry and academia. You know well that as a multinational company, you have certain challenges. Of course, Dr. Alka Sharma, if she's around, probably can clarify. Can you explain more on that? How would you overcome the first part related to the academia interfacing? And the last one, what do you mean by infrastructure, and where do you think we need to improve a lot?
Yeah, so when you look in terms of the collaboration as such, so I think fundamentally there needs to be a shift looking into the future. And I think when I talked about the industry of the future is not yet built, it is about coming together, the government, the academia. The government also pumps in a lot of money, BIRAC, DBT, so much money is being invested. How much of money is being invested for short term? How much of money is being invested into the long term? And I think very clearly, if we are able to link some of the long-term aspects which the government is focusing, the projects, the opportunities out there, channelize that into academia, call the industry, call the technology leaders out there. Can we have one sort of an ecosystem out there so we get the best results out? For every dollar that is invested into the research, we get the maximum output. That is where I think there is an opportunity, because the future is not yet built. We can get it right there. The second is also in terms of infrastructure is, Supu was explaining in terms of how can we help in the whole setup of the infrastructure for manufacturing, or the space and licenses and all of that. That's one aspect about it. But the other aspect about it is also, can we look in terms of the whole aspect of the ecosystem holistically? Demand, manpower planning, strategic manpower requirements, all of that. Because the industry of the future, 2030, 2050, what does it require from academics? What does it require for the current generation or the current manpower to be upskilled? We need to have a roadmap. We need to have a structured planning for that. All of that has to come together. And I think we have a responsibility, both as industry, as academia, everybody to come sit on a table, define a roadmap. It's definitely possible. Because again here, we need to look into the future, not into the past. I probably used this 3 times today, but that is what is going to make a hell of a lot of difference.
Thank you. For all the 3 of you, one common question. I think we are talking about the challenges today. I would like to specifically look at the regulatory challenges for all these areas, number 1. And the biodiversity loss in India, which we would still say it's draconian, which people are scared to access any biological resource, let it be an Indian company, and the multinational company, of course, cannot so easily. We are, as able, trying to give some representations through DBT and others about how should their biodiversity loss be. What is that you're practically facing today? Where do you think probably we should be doing better? So we'll start with Dr. Jignu.
So I will speak from my own experience because we set up India's first commercial biobank. And at the time we were contemplating doing this in 2011, there were no real guidelines for a biobank. So the ICMR guidelines at that time were self-contradictory at several places depending on which page you were on, because they interwove clinical trials, transplants, and all kinds of biological organs, etc., in between from biomedical research. So in order to stay above the fray, we actually looked at guidelines from Helsinki, from University College London, from Amsterdam Biobank. We took guidelines from the world, synthesized them, and implemented them, assuming that by being well above whatever ICMR had that time prescribed, we would be clear. Subsequently, in 2017, ICMR revised their guidelines, and we had some discussions with some of the people who had retired from ICMR by that time, but some of that feedback may have gone back, I don't know. Now there is a specific section on biobanking and how material can be used, what exactly is waiver of consent, what is minimal risk to the patient if you are not altering their treatment, and how you can work ethically in a commercial environment. That was extremely important. So I think sometimes people like us who are anxious to get going have to look at the world as our compass, start something knowing that we are doing something right, and then maybe through dialogue, maybe through patience, maybe through various interactions, hope that our government comes to the same point. As you say, many of our laws are extremely draconian. Maybe the post-colonial mind frame has not come in. Some of our other laws are also very draconian. So I think bit by bit we need to chip away at these, make them more rational and forward-looking, in harmony with the rest of the world, because I don't think we are doing anything unethical specifically in one country. Everybody is trying to be ethical. So let us have more common, harmonious guidelines. That would be good.
We have made some representation on that. Hopefully, we'll have some change. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
I really support Jugnu's comments. I think forward-looking, that is what is a very, very critical element. How can we make it more forward-looking? How can we be more transparent? The regulator, the government can be more clear in saying what is a strict no, what is maybe in between, we need some help, or we need some more some more documentation, X, Y, Z. What is a clear yes? I think if you put the unknowns, knowns, and maybes, then it helps the industry to sort of also come, because it's speed, it's time. Every day that is lost is lost for the country. So if there is a clarity around that, then the industry will also work towards it. And the maybes are where a lot of times time is lost, because the government regulator doesn't know, the industry doesn't know, is not able to move forward. Can we sit down, hey, these are the 10 areas, these are the domains that are maybes, let's find a way, path forward for this. This is a clear yes, this is a clear no. What should be done, what is not, what is allowed, what is not allowed, and what is, I think that kind of a framework will really help forward.
Yeah. Subbu, before you take over, I just want to let you all know one practically a big challenge which happened, of course, to Novozymes. We were selling about 40 enzymes for the food segment for about 3 decades. And food safety standards came out with a sudden rule that all these enzymes have to be approved. And these were GM products. I'd like to let you all know, while that's a good exercise, the food safety want to be international standards, the exercise which they went through, they did not even have what sort of dossier need to be presented. And we had played an important role to say what's happening elsewhere in the world. It took about 3 years for this 40 enzymes to be approved. But the usage of this enzyme and the value, the bioeconomy was more than 25,000 crores. Imagine what would have happened if these enzymes, which were already being used, have been disapproved. So these are something which actually we are going through certain challenges, something which we need to be aware, and biodiversity laws are something which I think all of us together have to put together a framework which ABLE has already got representations from various segments, which is very, very critical. Over to you.
I think most people know about the National Biodiversity Act, right? In our space, what do we need? We need a cell, and you modify the cell and you produce a product, or you use the cell which already produces a product, or you nowadays use a cell which you can eat, right? Now, the situation is that if you sourced any of this cell, even if it's a natural cell from an Indian environment, it falls under the National Biodiversity Act. And people can't wait till the parliament sits together and makes these simple changes which allows you to use it as long as you're not giving away sandalwood or some special rice species and things like that. So what has it done? I will tell you my example again, and another example of one of our colleagues. In my case, I opened my second company in the US. And any cells I need to do research on, I import them. So there's a way around it. But by doing what we are doing, we are moving the IP out of the country. We are moving the whole value out of the country. All this needs is that one focus group, but unfortunately it's an act, but it needs to be done. And while we are making representations, we are speaking, I've been part of ABLE too. If you're not able to get to that decision-making point where they can say, okay, as Mohan said, take these out, these are simple, clear this, and let's debate the more controversial or more complicated ones. If that can be done, a lot of companies can be established here. Like now when I want a beef cell or a chicken cell or a fish cell, I just import it from one of the labs. So I stay clear of Biodiversity Act. One, I pay them. Two, I keep the asset out so that they don't come back on me and say, because there's no clarity on what we should do. But being who I am, I want it to be out of India. But this is happening.
Thank you. I think with this, we will like to open for a very few questions if the Pannitkar and team could allow us. Perfect, 2. Anybody? I know you're all hungry. Maybe not much questions, but all I can, you're there. Yes, doctor. Somebody who should not ask questions have got up.
She's giving solutions, I think.
Also, just to take this forward, and I have requested Dipanvita to share the recommendations of these panel discussion with us. And as I mentioned earlier also that we are in the process of revising our document for BIRAC, because at that time, 10 years back, that was a requirement. Now, after a decade, I think that has to be revisited, so that we are doing it. And very soon that will be submitted to the government for approval. So many new things we are adding to that, including biomanufacturing, and also the many recommendations which has emerged now in the panel discussion, and since morning there were discussion on other most important areas, data and all. So the request is that from Dipanvita to share the recommendations with us, and we have also taken some notes on that. But these are very, very important topics for the country as a whole, and this is the right time to take this forward. And as I said, that DBT is the key funding agency who has to take these challenges and opportunity forward, because biotechnology sector that the DBT is promoting right from the beginning, And now with BIRAC, we are ready to take this ahead. So that was my, thank you.
Thank you so much. Very encouraging. Any other questions? I don't see any. I'll quickly like to summarize and say that we have definitely stood up as a country when it comes to vaccine manufacturing, vaccine innovation. We see the opportunities which we discussed today, especially the smart protein and bioenergy, again, India to lead the world, something which we believe in it, and Subbu mentioned about the opportunity over here. I think if we can definitely put across to DBT and the government of India what is that is required, because the asks are very, very simple. We are talking about infrastructure, we are talking about regulatory support, which is definitely possible. And we see that India will definitely drive and lead the world when it comes to smart proteins. And bioenergy, I would like to say, the government of India has definitely taken this initiative to set up the 3 oil marketing companies to put together. The success of it will make our technology, indigenous technology, to go outside India. And I feel that when it comes to biofuel, with all the Russian-Ukrainian war and the challenges people are facing, India could support the world from a fuel point of view, is what is my belief. With this, thank you very much, and thanks every one of you for paying attention to us. Thank you very much.
Now we definitely break for lunch. Hope there is still lunch available because we had opened it up, and I'm sure we'll get food. So don't worry. The next session is supposed to start at 2:30, but I was thinking we'll have maybe 2:40 is when we'll start the session. I've already informed Dr. Renu Swarup that around 2:40 I'll let her know. So please. Okay, you want a picture? And if you're thinking, where is my gift? It's in your bag.